We are moving on to Lesson 5, The Rise of Civilizations. Let's go ahead. Well, let's look through your digital notebook quick. It looks like you have 8 pages in this digital notebook. We are starting with your 4 vocab words. Let's go ahead and listen to the lesson.
Lesson 5. The Rise of Civilizations. As farming spread, many small settlements appeared. In time, some villages grew into cities. In this lesson, you will read about the rise of early civilizations.
All right, let's go ahead and watch the video. Let me move myself out of the way.
When we look at early human history, we talk about civilizations. What exactly do we mean by that? The great early civilizations grew up in Asia and Africa, mainly in the valleys of great rivers, which supplied water for farming, like the Nile in Egypt, the Indus in India, and the Tigris and Euphrates in the Middle East. Different peoples lived there, and their civilizations were different in many ways, but they all shared certain features that help define just what a civilization is. In fact, those features are still generally true for today's civilizations, the ones you and I live in today. Long before civilizations grew up, people in many places were living in farming villages. Over time, some villages grew into towns and then into cities with thousands of residents. Once you had cities, you had the basis for what historians see as a civilization. Cities grew up mainly where people had enough resources like land and water and food. They probably had other resources too, like minerals or crops to trade with nearby people. Someone had to figure out how to store the corn or wheat or other resources and manage them for everyone. And so, to have a civilization, you had to have government. A central government could do a lot of things that scattered cities and towns couldn't do on their own. People began to work together to create things that would eventually make up the basics of a civilization. Officials could organize people to build walls and defend the city from enemies. People might work together to dig canals to water their fields or build roads to expand the trade routes. A central government could also organize workers to build great public works projects, huge structures like the Great Wall of China or the Pyramids of Egypt. Many of those, of course, depended on unwilling workers, slaves, or prisoners of war, or the very poor. Government was not the only thing that brought people together. Early civilizations also had an organized shared religion. Rulers and nobles were also often priests. While this is less true today, shared values are still a uniting bond. So many people living together in one place meant a more varied and interesting population. A great city needed people who could do many different specialized jobs, from cooks and carpenters to scribes and musicians. It also gave all kinds of artists the chance to produce great works of art and architecture. Some were huge, like the pyramids, while others might be delicate gold jewelry or a carved statue of a lion. They all gave the civilization its own special culture. Just as in the earlier towns, people ended up in different social classes, some rich, many poor, some in the middle. Finally, most great civilizations had a writing system. That let people keep records, write history and poetry, and pass ideas on to people thousands of years later. So, what is a city? A civilization? Basically, cities were the centers of religion, government, and culture. A few also became centers of a civilization, which brought together cities and towns inside one complex society. People lived under a well-organized government with merchants, craftspeople, farmers, and other workers that kept things running. Civilizations can seem, and in fact are, very different from one another. But even today, as you've seen, they all have a number of things in common. How do major features of civilization appear in your community? Which do you think are more or less important today?
All right, let's go ahead and look at our vocab words. You've already seen these words because you've already done the Frayer. So let's look at the 4 words. Remember, go to the PowerPoint, that purple PowerPoint, and just get the definitions, copy and paste them into your digital notebook. If you want to type them from right here, that's fine, but you have to use these definitions. So we have civilization, complex society that has cities, a well-organized government, and workers with specialized jobs. Remember, we learned specialized jobs, that's one skill. Resource, supply of something that can be used as needed. Religion, people's beliefs and practices about the existence, nature, and worship of a god or gods. And lastly, social class, group of people living in similar economic conditions. Get those words defined now.